Every story you're about to hear was earned, not given. This one belongs to Frank Murphy, a man whose hands have earned respect in two very different ways. For 37 years, he's been cutting hair with the same precision he once brought to something far more dangerous. The young guys in town thought he was just another aging barber earning his daily bread, until one morning, a young Air Force pilot walked in and spotted something that told a different story. A story that was earned through blood, sweat, and 30,000 feet of altitude over enemy territory. Welcome to Earned Stories. Before we share this tale of earned honor and quiet service, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button, because every story we share here was earned, not given. The barbershop sat on the corner of Main and Cedar, a place where respect was earned, one haircut at a time. Murphy's barbershop had survived 3 decades because Frank Murphy earned his customers' trust the old-fashioned way, through consistent, quality service that never asked for praise. Frank had earned his place in this small town through 37 years of showing up, every day, 8 to 5. No appointments, no fancy treatments. Just the kind of earned craftsmanship that comes from hands that understand precision matters. He'd earned his reputation quietly, first come, first served, cash only, and a haircut that was always worth exactly what you paid for it. Most customers liked him fine. He'd earned their respect through reliability, polite, professional, never keeping you waiting longer than necessary. But he didn't chat about the weather or offer opinions on local politics. That kind of restraint, that discipline, had been earned through experience most people couldn't imagine. The younger crowd called him the quiet barber, not knowing that his silence had been earned through years when speaking carelessly could cost lives. But the older customers, the ones who'd been coming since the shop opened, they'd earned the right to notice things others missed. The way Frank's hands never shook, even at 73. The way he checked his surroundings when the door chimed, not paranoid, just aware. Habits earned in places where awareness was survival. And when planes flew overhead, Frank would pause, just for a second. His scissors would stop mid-cut. His eyes would track the sound. And for that brief moment, he wasn't a barber anymore. He was somewhere else entirely, remembering when that sound meant something very different, something that had to be earned every single day. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had earned his wings the hard way, through 2 years of training that washed out more candidates than it graduated. When he walked into Murphy's barbershop that Tuesday morning, he carried himself with the earned confidence of someone who'd mastered one of the world's most demanding professions. Jake had earned the right to wear the uniform, but today he was in civilian clothes, jeans and a polo shirt that couldn't hide the military bearing he'd earned through countless hours of discipline. The way he sat, the way his eyes automatically cataloged the room, these were habits earned through training that never really ends. Air Force? Frank asked quietly, as he draped the cape around Jake's shoulders, recognizing something that could only be earned, never faked. Jake looked surprised. Yes, sir. How'd you know? Frank didn't answer immediately. He just began working, his earned expertise evident in every movement. Base haircut growing out, he said finally. Posture. Watch. The kind of observations earned through decades of reading people. What do you fly? Frank asked, though something in his tone suggested he'd earned the right to ask such questions. F-16, sir. Just finished my transition training. Still getting used to her, but she's incredible. That's when it happened. Frank's scissors stopped. Not obviously, just a half-second pause that Jake noticed because pilots earn their survival by noticing everything. You know F-16s? Jake asked, studying Frank's reflection in the mirror. Frank resumed cutting. A little, but Jake had earned enough experience to know that a little from a man like Frank usually meant a lot more. My instructor told us about some of the older pilots. Said there were guys flying F-16s back when they first came out. Must have been something, being part of that first generation. Another pause. Frank's movements remained precise, but Jake could see something in the older man's eyes, the look of someone remembering things that had been earned at great cost. The early birds were temperamental, Frank said softly. Fly-by-wire was new. Computer between you and the jet. Some of the old-school pilots didn't trust it. Jake turned slightly in the chair. You talk like you were there. Frank didn't respond, but Jake could see it now. The way Frank held himself, the precision in his movements, the earned confidence that only came from mastering something dangerous. This wasn't just knowledge, this was experience, earned firsthand. Jake had earned enough flight time to recognize a fellow pilot when he saw one. Something about the way Frank moved, the way he processed information, the earned calm that comes from facing life or death decisions at 30,000 feet. As Frank moved around the chair, Jake caught a glimpse of something under the barber's coat sleeve. Just a flash of color, but enough to make him look twice. When Frank reached up to adjust the overhead light, the sleeve pulled back further. A tattoo. Not just any tattoo. Jake had seen enough of them around the base to know the difference between decoration and something earned. This was specific, military, and from an era when such things weren't given lightly. The 388th Fighter Wing Patch, vintage version, the kind only worn by pilots who'd earned it through combat missions during the early Gulf War era, when every sortie was earned through skill, courage, and more than a little luck. Jake's mind raced. The timeline fit perfectly. The age was right. The way Frank talked about the F-16, the precision in his movements, the earned awareness in his eyes. It all made sense now. "Sir," Jake said carefully, "that ink on your arm, that's 388th Fighter Wing, isn't it?" Frank's hands stilled completely. For the first time since Jake had walked in, the older man looked directly at him in the mirror. Their eyes met, and Jake saw something he recognized, the look of someone deciding whether to open a door that had been closed for a very long time. Frank set down his scissors and slowly rolled up his sleeve. The tattoo was clearer now, but what made Jake's stomach tighten with the small marks below it. Mission markers, each one representing a combat sortie, each one earned through missions where coming home wasn't guaranteed. Jake counted them quickly. 12 marks, 12 missions where Frank had earned his way home. Gulf War? Jake asked quietly. Frank nodded once. 88 through 93, based out of Hill Air Force Base, then deployed to Prince Sultan. His voice was even, matter of fact, but Jake could hear the weight behind it, the weight of experience that could only be earned, never taught. You flew strike missions? Another nod. Close air support mostly. Some interdiction. F-16C Block 30. Frank paused, then added softly, back when the jet and the pilot had to earn each other's trust completely. Jake felt the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just any veteran. This was a combat pilot from the early days of precision warfare, when F-16s were proving themselves over Iraqi airspace, when every mission mattered and survival was earned through skill, training, and sometimes pure luck. "Sir," Jake said, his voice filled with respect that had to be earned, never demanded. "How many hours?" Frank looked at him for a long moment. 3,417. Combat and training combined. Each hour earned through dedication that most people couldn't comprehend. The barbershop felt different now, smaller, like the walls had moved closer around a story that had been waiting 30 years to be recognized by someone who'd earned the right to understand it. Jake sat in that chair feeling like he'd just discovered a living piece of aviation history. Here was a man who'd earned his place in the sky when the F-16 was still proving itself, who'd earned respect through missions that helped write the playbook Jake was now learning from. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking," Jake said carefully, "why barbering after flying?" Frank resumed cutting, but slower now, more thoughtful. "When you spend 20 years earning your survival through your hands, you find other ways to use them. Cutting hair requires the same precision, same focus, different stakes. But don't you miss it? The flying?" Frank paused, understanding that this question came from someone who'd earned the right to ask it. "Every day," he said simply. "But missing something and being able to do something about it are different things." Jake watched Frank work in the mirror, noting how the older man's movements had changed. Before, they'd been mechanical, routine. Now there was something else, a kind of grace that spoke to years of fine motor control under pressure, earned through countless hours when precision meant the difference between mission success and failure. "My instructors talk about the old days like they were simpler," Jake continued. "But from what I've read, you guys were figuring it out as you went. No playbook." Frank allowed himself a small smile, the kind earned through surviving what others couldn't imagine. "We wrote the playbook. Trial and error, mostly error. Lost some good people learning what worked and what didn't." The weight of that statement hung in the air. Jake realized he was sitting across from someone who'd helped pioneer the tactics he was now learning, who'd made mistakes so Jake wouldn't have to. Lessons earned at the highest possible cost. "Can I ask what happened? Why you left?" Frank finished the back of Jake's head and moved to the front, trimming carefully around the ears with the earned precision of decades. "Medical. Inner ear issue. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to ground me. Doctor said I could appeal. Fight it, but," he shrugged, "I'd had a good run. Time to let someone else earn their turn." That must have been devastating. Frank met his eyes in the mirror again. You know what they tell you in pilot training about the worst-case scenario? Jake nodded. Plan for it, train for it, but don't dwell on it. Same principle applies to life. You plan for the end of flying from the day you start. Doesn't make it easier, but it makes it survivable. Words earned through experience that couldn't be taught in any classroom. The door chimed, and an older customer walked in. A regular, by the way. Frank nodded to him. The man took a seat in the waiting area, picked up a magazine, but Jake noticed how he watched Frank work, respectfully, patiently, like he knew he was witnessing something special, something earned. Sir, Jake said quietly, do the people here know? Frank shook his head. No point. That was then. This is now. But don't you think they'd? Respect is earned in the present, Frank interrupted gently, not borrowed from the past. Jake thought about that as Frank finished up the trim. Here was a man who'd earned his place in the sky through 20 years of service, mastered one of the most demanding jobs in the military, and was now earning respect in a completely different way, through the same dedication he'd once brought to the cockpit. No fanfare, no stories, no seeking recognition, just earned excellence day after day. Frank dusted off Jake's neck and shoulders, then stepped back to admire his work with the earned pride of someone who'd mastered his craft twice over. How's that look? Jake examined himself in the mirror. The cut was perfect, better than anything he'd gotten on base. Precise, clean, professional. The kind of earned quality that came from decades of practice. Outstanding, sir. Best haircut I've had in months. Frank removed the cape and shook it out. $25. Jake reached for his wallet but hesitated. Sir, can I ask you something else? Frank nodded while cleaning his scissors, understanding that this conversation had earned the right to continue. Do you ever regret it? The career change? Frank considered the question while putting his tools away, thinking about a career earned through dedication and ended through circumstances beyond his control. I spent 20 years in a job where precision meant life or death, where split-second decisions could determine whether you came home or became a statistic. When that ended, I had two choices: spend the rest of my life chasing something I couldn't have anymore, or find a new way to matter. He gestured around the small barbershop with earned pride. This place has been here longer than I've been alive. Men come in here for 40, 50 years. Generations of the same families. I cut hair for grandfathers, fathers, and now their sons. That's not small, that's continuity. Jake handed him the $25, but Frank wasn't finished. You want to know what I miss most about flying? It's not the speed or the adrenaline. It's the precision, the way everything had to be perfect, or people got hurt. That's still here. Different scale, same principle. His words carried the weight of experience earned at great cost. The older customer in the waiting area looked up from his magazine. Frank's being modest, he said with a grin. Man's never given a bad haircut in 3 decades. Some of us drive from 2 towns over just to sit in that chair. Frank looked slightly embarrassed. Charlie's exaggerating. Am not, Charlie replied. Show him the wall. Jake looked where Charlie was pointing. Behind the cash register, barely visible unless you knew to look, was a small framed photograph, black and white, showing a much younger Frank in flight gear standing next to an F-16. He looked serious, professional, ready, earned. I didn't put that there, Frank said quietly. Charlie found it in some old military magazine, had it framed without asking. Charlie stood up for his turn in the chair. Seemed ashamed to let people forget, he said simply. Jake looked from the photograph to Frank, understanding something new. This wasn't a story about a man who'd fallen from greatness. This was about someone who'd found a different kind of greatness, one that served people in small daily ways instead of dramatic, distant ones. Thank you, Jake said. And he wasn't just talking about the haircut. Frank nodded. Fly safe, Lieutenant. And remember, the jet's only as good as the pilot. Trust your training, but trust your instincts too. As Jake headed for the door, Frank called after him. If you're ever in the area again, you know where to find me. Jake paused at the door. Sir? When I get back to base, would it be all right if I told my squadron commander about you? Not the details, just that there are people like you out here. People who earned the right to teach us something. Frank thought for a moment, then nodded. As long as you remember that the story isn't about what was, it's about what is. Every day we choose who we want to be. Jake walked out of that barbershop a different person than when he'd walked in. Not because he'd gotten a great haircut, though he had, but because he'd met someone who showed him what earned honor really looks like. It doesn't always wear a uniform, and it doesn't always live in the past. That afternoon, he called his squadron commander and told him about Frank Murphy. Not to seek publicity or recognition for the old pilot, but to share what he'd learned, that the best people don't stop serving when their primary mission ends. They find new ways to matter, new ways to serve, new ways to earn respect. Word spread quietly through the base. Not gossip or rumor, but the kind of respectful recognition that military people give to their own. Within a month, Frank's barbershop started seeing new customers, young airmen driving 2 hours for a haircut from a man who'd earned his wings before they were born. Frank never acknowledged the change directly. He just kept doing what he'd always done, cutting hair with the same precision he'd once brought to air-to-ground combat. But if you looked closely, you might notice he stood a little straighter, talked a little more, shared a few more stories from the old days. Not because he needed recognition, but because he realized his experience still had value. That the lessons earned in a cockpit over Iraq could still teach young pilots something about dedication, precision, and finding purpose after the mission changes. The photograph behind the register stayed where Charlie had put it. Frank never asked him to move it, and Charlie never offered to take it down. Sometimes new customers would notice it and ask questions. Frank would answer briefly, factually, then change the subject back to their haircut. Because that's what earned heroes do. They let their past inform their present without letting it define it. They find new ways to serve without diminishing what they've already given. 3 months later, Jake got promoted and transferred to a different base. Before he left, he made one last trip to Murphy's barbershop. Not for a haircut. His hair was still perfect from the last visit, but to say goodbye to a man who'd taught him something no flight manual could cover. That legacy isn't just about what you did. It's about who you choose to be. Every single day, long after the mission ends. Frank was there when Jake arrived, just finishing up with another customer. When they were alone, Jake said simply, "Thank you for the lesson, sir." Frank nodded. "Keep your eyes on the horizon, Lieutenant. And remember, precision matters, no matter what you're doing." As Jake left that day, he looked back once at the small barbershop with the spinning pole and the quiet man inside. 30 years from now, when Jake's own flying days were over, he wondered if he'd have the grace to find a new way to serve, a new way to matter. The way Frank Murphy had. Frank Murphy's story was earned, not given. Every flight hour, every combat mission, every year behind that barber's chair, all of it earned through dedication, sacrifice, and the understanding that true service never really ends. He never wrote a memoir because his story wasn't finished, never gave interviews because his current mission mattered more than his past glory, never sought recognition because he'd already earned the only approval that mattered, his own. That's the thing about earned stories. They don't need audiences. They don't need applause. They just need purpose. And sometimes that purpose looks like cutting hair in a small-town barbershop, treating every customer with the same respect you once showed your wingman. So now I ask you, what have you earned in your life? What story are you writing through your daily choices, your quiet service, your dedication to something bigger than yourself? Share your earned story in the comments. Tell us about someone whose respect was earned, not given. Because here at Earned Stories, we believe that the most powerful lives aren't always the most visible ones, and sometimes the greatest lessons come from watching someone who's already achieved everything choose to start over with the same excellence they brought to their first calling. Thank you for watching. If this earned story touched you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes aren't born, they're earned, one choice at a time. We'll see you in the next story, and until then remember, every story worth telling was earned by someone who chose to matter.